Back in 2011, about 5 years ago, the creators of the TV cartoon series South Park put together a play which became a runaway hit known as the Book of Mormon. It's now on its second national tour, and its New York City performances continue to sell out, with lowest cost seats in the balcony running about $156. For all the apparent parodying and satire of the Mormon religion in this Broadway show, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has not boycotted it, has not condemned it, has not shown dismay about it officially whatsoever. The official reaction of the church has been described as measured. Mormons have attended the play. Some have stood outside the theater doors saying, with copies of the actual Book of Mormon, that is the sacred text, "You've seen the play, now read the book." That's what an ad says in their playbills. Someone involved in the production said that in a year and a half he had not run into one Mormon who had taken offense openly to the play. About a dozen people this person knew, allegedly, had been so moved that they had joined the Mormon faith as a result. For any of you who might be considering seeing the play, I do not plan on spoiling the story. One of those in this room who has not yet viewed it is yours truly, Van Bortin. I have heard the soundtrack of a few of the songs, and I have read an article about it in that gospel known as Wikipedia, and I'm married to someone who's seen it. I will say this much: the play involves Mormon missionaries in Uganda who are having some trouble getting residents to understand and accept their message. They encounter a lively song popular among their Ugandan hosts, with the lyrics something like Haza Doga Ibawai. Sounds a little like Hakuna Matata of the Lion King. And one day they asked for a translation. They had the general feeling that the meaning of the song was "What will be, que sera, sera." They find out instead that the meaning of the lyrics of this song begin with a common profanity that starts with the letter F, followed by the pronoun you, and then the word God. Of course, once the missionaries learn that that's what their friends have been singing, they're a little bit disarmed and stunned. But the Ugandans mean it. They're facing on a daily basis the AIDS pandemic, poverty, hardship. But it's once one of the missionaries forgets his missionary lines and begins to ad-lib that he starts to address the actual challenges the local population faces. And he begins to gain their trust. What would be the book of UUism? For starters, a Unitarian Universalist missionary is virtually a contradiction in terms. It's emphatically not that we don't want to share our free faith. We unequivocally and enthusiastically do. But we resist high-pressure sales tactics, believing that religion is too important, too sacred, too personal, too fraught with universal mystery, to be imposed by a hard sell, like selling a used car, or an encyclopedia, or Amway products. You may have heard the joke, what do you get when you combine a Unitarian Universalist with a Jehovah's Witness? And the answer is someone who rings your doorbell on Saturday morning and then isn't sure why he or she is there. I find that riddle amusing, but also a little bothersome. It implies we have no message, no beliefs worth sharing. And I believe, I'm paid to believe, that we have a tremendous liberating and affirming approach to share. But share is the crucial word. We don't cajole or harangue or force feed or act as though we have a monopoly on the religious truth market that others reject at their peril. Instead, we offer an approach that makes room for each person's individual journey, which calls upon us to respect one another amid our differences, which above all makes the person who signs at the religious dotted line you, not a hierarch or an inflexible doctrine funneled through you. I feel that the message is summed up in one phrase. If you remember nothing else this morning, I hope you remember this phrase. It comes from the late Reverend Harry Schofield, many years a Unitarian Universalist minister in San Francisco. The freedom to think and the courage to love. We talk about elevator speeches, about Unitarian Universalism. That phrase is enough for a very short elevator ride. You only need to go one floor by saying the freedom to think and the courage to love. If we want to characterize the spirit of Unitarian Universalism, even in a shorter amount of words, one word, it is an F word. Freedom. Freedom. We believe in spiritual freedom, in the free mind and in free inquiry. Not for nothing was the first country to embrace Unitarianism, where Unitarianism officially was invented. Also the first country in Europe to offer an edict of religious freedom, and that's Transylvania, a little more than 450 years ago, what's now Romania. No one shall be made to suffer on account of religion, said John Sigismund, the king of Transylvania in 1568. He was the only Unitarian king in human history. Some say that this commitment to freedom of belief means that we're without beliefs. No, we cherish our beliefs, which can be found on bookmarks, on the third page of our hymnals, on congregational walls. We, for example, amid our eloquent diversity, unite in affirming the worth and dignity of every human being. And we cannot abide any outlook that is an affront to universal human dignity and universal human worth. I was reminded of that when I gather some years ago, George Lincoln Rockwell, the president of the American Nazi Party, signed a membership book at a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Virginia. We have no room for ethnic and racial hatred. So what is in the book of UUism? For starters, it isn't one book. Someone quipped, "We have a loose leaf Bible." Like different colored threads in a tapestry, varying flowers and blossoms in a garden. We're enriched by diverse cultures, thinkers, poets, leaders, sages of religious and secular background that have graced the earth. You only need to look in the back of the Singing of the Living tradition to find words from the Ojibwe Indians, Thoreau, Olympia Brown, the first woman to be ordained by any denomination in this country, was the Universalist Church of America, St. Francis of Assisi, the Kalidasa, the ancient Indian scripture, and Leslie Pole Cosba, a pagan, to name only a few. But there's another respect in which our Bible is loose leaf. Someone who just became a Unitarian Universalist, where I hang out many Sundays, the congregation at Shelter Rock in Long Island, said he couldn't celebrate the portion of the Passover Seder that describes God's decision to kill the firstborn Egyptian children. You recall there are 10 plagues, and that's the topper. After lice and frogs and boils and locusts, all of which are quite familiar or were quite frequent in ancient Egypt as a result of extreme weather. Then the angel of death, in a culminating act of punishment, decides to pass over the Jewish children and kill the firstborn Egyptian children. We're to celebrate God's doing away with innocent infants? You don't have to answer. That's a rhetorical question. But there's another part of that story which has always intrigued me. Once the Hebrews reach the Sinai Desert, the promised land, where they get to feast on manna, which is one of the most boring foods imaginable, and they start to feel homesick for the gourmet meals of Egypt. It's in the book of Numbers, too. They really miss the garlic seasonings in their dinners. They are nonetheless, the moment they're in freedom, and I think anyone who has left oppression and is suddenly in a region or a country where freedom is the norm, recognizes the ecstasy. God is crying. Why? Because the Egyptian young men, maybe young women, who have been pursuing them are drowning in the Red Sea. There is no one chosen people. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are the province of all human beings. For me, the Passover story's meaning is liberation. I remember one of the very moving seders I did attend, in which 5 people told of personal liberation in their own lives. One of them had an alcoholic father who spent all the family money, and the family scrambled for food each week. Another one survived Argentina's so-called dirty war as friends were tortured. Our conscience doesn't allow us to accept mass slaughters that are described in the Hebrew Scriptures. And yet, there are words in the Bible ethically which, I believe, have never been surpassed. Like Isaiah's call that swords or maybe drone planes be beaten into plowshares, and that nobody study war anymore. Amos' plea that justice roll up like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Having a loose leaf Bible means we don't leave our minds and hearts at the doorstep or before we open the cover to the book. We don't insist on Galileo recanting his findings or submit to parents' pleas that Darwinian evolution not be taught in our public educational institutions. Curiosity may have killed the cat, some cats, but it also led to the finding of the Salk vaccine. We unapologetically have a love of learning. David Rankin put it in his wallet-sized pamphlet. We believe in the never-ending search for truth. If the mind and heart are truly free and open, the revelations that appear to the human spirit are infinitely numerous, eternally fruitful, wondrously exciting. So, I feel Adam and Eve were correct in eating the apple from the tree of knowledge. Their original sin was curiosity. Bravo! Maybe Adam and Eve were Unitarian. But there's another reason that I feel abiding loyalty to Unitarian Universalism. It's not that I am a birthright Unitarian, but I am. As a child, I went to Sunday school by parental fiat, like so many children, but it doesn't seem necessarily like the children here. I remember role-playing with my father. I had to be the parent convincing the child it's a good idea to go to Sunday school, and he played the recalcitrant child. No, not going. But what drew me to Unitarian Universalism was our minister going to Selma, Alabama, in response to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s call in defense of voting rights for Black Americans. You may have seen the recent movie Selma. It's this time of year. It was early March. One of the Unitarian Universalist ministers who went, and there were more from our denomination than any other denomination, died. James Reed, who graduated at Princeton, beaten up and killed. Another non-minister, Unitarian Universalist congregant, Viola Leuzo, was slain in her car by a sniper as she was taking a civil rights worker home. We can read and accept the lofty proclamation about the worth and dignity of every human being, but that phrase gains urgency when we think of people ready to risk hostility, limb, and life for that principle. I want to return for a moment to Uganda, the site of the Book of Mormon. What would Unitarian Universalists be doing in Uganda? There actually are Unitarian Universalist congregations in Uganda. The Reverend Mark Kiemba stood up for the human rights of gay and lesbian people there in a country which almost legislated that homosexuality would be a capital offense. There was a magazine in Uganda that published names and addresses and photos of gay rights activists calling for their hangings. And a champion of gay rights there, David Cotto, was 5 years ago beaten up and killed. But that hasn't kept Mark Kiemba from setting up an orphanage in the congregation he serves for children infected with HIV or for children whose parents have lost their lives to that scourge. The book of UUism, then, is about people caring about other people. The freedom to think and the courage to love. I think that's a greater phrase than let's make America great again. Let's make the whole world great again. The book of UUism is about people and about deeds. It's about William Ellery Channing, who first used the word Unitarian in this country in 1817, who said that religious education should not be indoctrination. He helped the poor of Boston so generously he almost became one of them himself. started the first peace organization in this country. Theodore Parker, who outspokenly resisted the fugitive slave law, and the less famous Sidney Gay from my home in Staten Island, who was a stop on the Underground Railroad. It's Dorothy Dix, of this congregation's namesake, who single-handedly improved the conditions in which those who were mentally ill were consigned throughout this country and Canada. It's about Olympia Brown. I mentioned her already. The first minister ordained by a national denomination who was female in 1865. She gave up her ministry to crusade for women's suffrage, and at the age of 90, voted in her first national election. It's about the Reverend Waitzel Sharp and Martha Sharp, who gave up their ministry in New England to help rescue people from the Nazis. There will be a television broadcast about them later this year. And there are the many unnamed people, unsung heroes, including some in this room, who made the world a little better, a little more equal, a little more just, a little more loving. We have a tomb of the unknown soldier. There should also be honor bestowed on the unknown drum majors of justice, the unknown do-gooders. In fact, I remember the sermon title I so love, Bleeding Hearts of the World, Arise. That same minister of my upbringing, Aaron Gilmartin, the late, who went to Selma in 1965, you know what else he did? He took my brother in when my brother was in trouble and had him live at his home for 6 months. The freedom to think and the courage to love. I am proud, both of you and of me, in all due humility, to be part of the book of UUism. Thank you. And I'm so proud of the Trinitarians, too.